Good morning and welcome back, and a happy 2025.
Cheers.
Cheers. We got our coffees here in the morning, which is a classic start to our day, as you guys would know if you've been watching the channel for a while. And speaking about that, we've actually hit our 1 year in the van.
Woo!
Living full time out of this thing. So I think today we're just gonna be talking about some of the highlights, like the worst moments we've had, sort of the pros and cons, and a realistic expectation of what it's like living full time out of this thing, traveling and also working, if anyone is thinking of doing that. So what were some of your favorite highlights in the van over the last year?
Honestly, I feel like there's been a lot. I feel like when you're traveling in the van and kind of living a nomadic lifestyle, it's very give or take, so you obviously have cons, which we will talk about, but I feel like some of my favorite personal highlights were all the friends that we made. So living in the van and traveling a lot, you're making a lot of new friends, you're socializing a lot, whether they're people doing van life or whether they're not people doing van life. So in Baja, made tons of new friends that we still keep in touch with as well. So hopefully you guys are watching too. And even in Calgary, for example, so when we were in Calgary for a bit, we made some new friends there. So constantly making new friends and meeting new people, seeing their stories and their journeys too, that's been really cool. I'd say just another new highlight is also just like being a local in different areas. So I feel like we've had the opportunity to be locals in Baja, being locals in Alberta too, being locals in different spots in Ontario too. So just kind of being able to live in different places, not really being tied down to one specific place. But yeah, even just like Baja, I think that was a huge highlight for us in 2024. Just waking up to the beaches and like the most surreal sunrises and sunsets. I think a lot of van lifers know this, but Baja is really the pinnacle of van life. I feel like a lot of people say that, but once you're there, you really see that because you see everyone else traveling in their vans. You can literally just park up right on the beach. So yeah, honestly, I feel like Baja was probably one of the biggest highlights.
Yeah, that was definitely my favorite part of it too, because I think I probably saw more sunrises and sunsets during our couple months in Baja than I had for like the entirety of my life before that, because everyone's just living out of their van, so you click like immediately. And that's like when we met some friends on this beach we stayed at for like a whole month. It just felt like we've like known them forever, and it was such a cool experience. And then also on top of that, just coming through the US too, being able to like kind of like camp for free kind of near like these national parks, so you get to go see these really cool national parks but not really spend any money sleeping, which was another awesome highlight.
I feel like too, even just seeing like the dogs living their best life. So I feel like obviously dogs are still living great lives like in Canada, but in Mexico, like just seeing the dogs running on the beach every morning, like just watching the sunrises and the sunsets, like meeting other dogs. Like I feel like in Baja it was so flexible that you could bring your dog anywhere, like into all the stores, like onto all the beaches. You don't really have to have them leashed. So just seeing the dogs like living their best lives on the beach, like and in the hot sun, like in Mexico, that was really great too.
Yeah, that actually was really cool too, because it's like there's dogs like honestly everywhere, especially in Loretto, like the amount of like stray dogs everywhere, and they're so friendly too. And another perfect story about what Yaz was talking about, how you can bring them anywhere, is that we actually went out for lunch one time, and it was a really hot day. We're like, oh, we had Milo, so we're like, let's just, I guess we'll just sit outside, and we're waiting for the waiter, and he comes out and he's like, oh, it's really hot, like, do you want to come sit inside? And we're like, oh, we have Milo. And he like looked at us like, yeah, like who cares, bring him inside as well, like he can just lie down. And it was just like such a culture shock, because like it obviously in North America, like that's just never gonna fly, bringing a dog into a restaurant. So that was pretty awesome, not really having to think about bringing your dog into places when you're traveling there, which was like a total awesome highlight as well.
Yeah, even just like all the tiny little moments that we experienced too. So for example, in Saskatchewan, like that national park that we went to, just going to the Dark Sky Preserve, because it's so flat. So at night when you're at the Dark Sky Preserve, like the stars that you see and the constellations that you see is unreal, absolutely unreal there. So even just cool little moments like that. Like when would we have ever traveled to Saskatchewan?
Yeah, or
like no shade towards Saskatchewan, but it's just we never had a reason to go there. Whereas like traveling in the van, traveling from Canada to just like everywhere else, like we got to the opportunity to really see kind of how cool Saskatchewan was. So just little moments like that too, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a perfect segue into like the pros and cons. Like a pro about that sort of thing would be like, since you're traveling by van, you're kind of going to a lot of places that aren't necessarily so touristy, like a lot of like kind of drive through or fly over, you know, places, which is like exactly what Saskatchewan is. Like if you like Yasmin was saying, if we were in Ontario and we were wanting to go out west, like you wouldn't even, and you just flew, you wouldn't even go anywhere near Saskatchewan, like you wouldn't even think about it. But it was pretty awesome. Some other pros about van life is like when you're kind of living out of here and traveling, like yeah, you're obviously spending money because you're like traveling around, but you're not spending like nearly as much money as you would if you were traveling this long and not having the van. Like you would have to pay for at least like a hostel or something, and like all your amenities and stuff. So that's another pro. And then also when you're working out of the van, like we are right now, is that you're saving like way more money, because like we don't have car payments on this van, so it's just, we don't really have rent right now, so we're just kind of just saving a lot of money working out of the van. Awesome pro. Another awesome pro, which I really like, is being able to like not stay in one spot. So it's like if you're a type of person that likes to move around a lot and likes to see a lot of different things, this would be awesome for you, because even if you're working, like if you want to work at a place for like a year, for example, and you get to see a cool spot, and then after a year you're like, hey, maybe I want to go, you know, work at this other place, you can go another single spot in the country, you can go do that really easily, and it could be kind of more of an expensive area, but it doesn't really necessarily matter if you're living out of your van, because your costs are going to be way down. That's another awesome pro. And another one is just like meeting so many like-minded people when you do stuff like that. Is probably my best pro. Like my favorite pro is like the amount of people that you get to meet that are just so like-minded is just amazing, because you don't get to really experience that day to day necessarily, but when you're traveling like this and you're meeting people that are doing the exact same thing as you, it's like you're gonna click right away, like we were saying before. And if Yaz wants to talk about some of the cons.
Yeah, before the cons though, I'd say like another big pro to van life is it really forces you to unplug like a lot of the times, because sometimes you're in a spot that doesn't really have service, or it has absolutely no service. So it really gives you, like, it pushes you to just like not be on your phone, not be on your computer, be off the socials, and just really like enjoying in the moment too. So I don't know, that's a pro that I've really learn to enjoy. Obviously sometimes it's nice being on socials, and we're not saying that like we're never on socials, but it really does push you to just enjoy your time and like figure out how to enjoy your time without being on your phones all the time. I'd say for some of the cons, I mean, it's very give or take, right? So I'd say for some of the cons, a big con for me is, for example, when you're sick, you don't have the same comfort level of being like when you're sick at home. So if you're in a house, like you can go rest in bed, or like if you're sick, you can just, you know, have that opportunity to be cozy at home. Whereas like in the van, definitely not as cozy or like as comfortable when you're sick, especially with ours too. You have to kind of turn it into bed mode. So like if you're sick when it's in couch mode, you have to kind of turn it into a bed in order to lie down. So that can be kind of tough if you are sick, because you don't have that opportunity really to just be as comfortable. I'd say another con with van life is just having to really be on your toes with like, and being like expecting that things are gonna go wrong. So obviously not everything will always go right. You kind of have to have that mindset that like something may go wrong and you have to be okay with it. So whether, you know, if you're in minus 18 degree weather and the heater breaks down, or, you know, if your car won't start. So you just have to be okay with like things going wrong pretty much. I'd say for another con is just being homesick sometimes. So for example, for Christmas, it was too expensive to fly home. We're in Alberta right now, so it was quite expensive to fly home this Christmas, so we weren't able to go back. So, you know, really just dealing with being homesick sometimes, not being able to be there for some of the big moments that happen with friends or family. That can be pretty tough, because you see everyone else enjoying those big moments and you get a little bit of FOMO. But obviously you still enjoy your time here, but like, not gonna lie, you do miss being with friends and family. It's not like you can just go over to their house and like have a coffee with them. But you know, one way that I've worked around that is just like scheduling coffee chats over FaceTime. So with my friends, I like to have coffee over FaceTime with them, making sure that I'm always staying connected with them. But it does get hard not being able to see people in person. Kind of along the same lines is, you know, if a big moment is happening, like a wedding, and you're trying to fly over there, obviously it makes attending those big events and those big moments more expensive, because obviously you want to be there, but it's not as simple as just like driving there and going to that wedding. You do have to kind of fly back home and arrange and plan for that. But yeah, I think those are kind of my bigger cons. I don't know if you have anything to add too. We're switching off a little bit because Andrew's arm was getting tired, so I'm just gonna hold it for a bit and we're gonna switch off. But like I said, Andrew, I don't know if you have any cons to add.
I think my biggest cons for living out of the van is that when you're traveling and you're not sort of in one spot, sort of like routinely like we are now, is that kind of close to around, you know, dinner time or when it starts getting darker, you want to try to find a place to sleep, and depending on where you are, it's a lot harder or easier where you are. So like always having to like think about that. I think another big con would be that's not, you know, you wouldn't have if you were living in a house, is that when you're living in a van, you're a little bit more aware of how much water you're using and how much electricity you're using, because obviously you don't have like an endless supply, and you got to make sure you're not running out of water, or you have enough water or propane for a cooktop, or you just want to make sure you're not draining your batteries and you're charging enough to use the amount that you're going to use. So it's like you're always sort of thinking about that, which you wouldn't have to if you're, you know, living out of like a house like normal. But I think another big con, no, sorry, that's about it.
Yeah, I feel like another big con is like the fact that you obviously can't have as much stuff in the van. So for example, like with clothes, you're so limited on space. I think Andrew and I both have like a shelf each that fits like
one cupboard.
That fits like one cupboard worth of clothes each. So like especially in the winters, like having thick sweaters, like it does take up like half your cupboard. So you really got to plan out with kind of like what you're gonna bring and what you're gonna need, and really minimize kind of what your necessities are. But even like for example with the weddings, like you're going home for a wedding, it does become a little bit more complicated because you obviously don't have like your nicer clothes with you like all the time, your wedding clothes. So like if your wedding is in one place but you have like all your clothes stored like in a separate place, it becomes complicated of like how to access your stuff or like getting your stuff too. Or even just like, I'd say another con is the fact that like you kind of always have to set your van up. So in a house, like you can literally just like go to bed. The next morning you wake up, you go like have dinner or like breakfast on your table. Whereas like with our van, we have it in bed mode, then we have to turn it into couch mode. If we're driving, we have to pack everything away. If we're like parked somewhere, we set everything up. So you're kind of constantly in that state of like setting up and taking down. So you really have to be okay with like constantly doing that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for some like tips and, you know, advice for people that are thinking about doing van life or think they'll like it, I think the biggest thing is that no matter how luxurious a van looks, it's always going to be less comfortable than an actual bed in a house. So if you know, are the type of person that likes to rough it when, you know, you're camping in a tent, like you like sort of that sleeping like that, like van life will be perfect for you. Like you won't have really any issues, because I don't think we had that much of a transition period.
No, we've always been big like into camping and stuff too. So I feel like Andrew and I have always been kind of fine with that kind of lifestyle. But if you're someone who kind of likes being cozy and like you like your stuff, you like being kind of like having a little bit more easier, you don't like roughing it necessarily. Like if you're not a huge camper, I wouldn't suggest doing van life, just because it is like obviously a step up from like camping in a tent, but like still you're still roughing it at the end of the day. Yep. And even like, I don't know if you mentioned, but like showering, for example, like you got to figure out showers too. So like you're not always showering every day unless you have like a gym membership, for example, or like you have a gym nearby. But like even in Baja, for example, like we got reef safe safe soap, and we were literally like showering in the ocean with like a reef safe soap. So it's like sometimes you have to be okay with like that kind of lifestyle too.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not as luxurious, and even like the vans that you see that have a shower, like those are never gonna be as nice as an actual shower, because a lot of the time it's like a water saving shower head, because you don't want to be using, like, think of how much water you're gonna be using in a shower, right? So it's just like, even when you see the vans with the shower, they're not the most luxurious showers. So it's just like, again, just very harping on the fact that if you're not into really roughing it and you really like those creature comforts, it's probably not gonna be your favorite thing in the world, like full time. We're switching off again. Arms getting tired. We don't really have a decent spot to like set up, so we're just been switching it with the arms. But I think another funny thing that we'll talk about right now is that over the last year, some of like the worst moments that we've had living out of this van. So Yaz, what are some of your absolute worst moments?
Honestly, I feel like my top worst moment that I ever experienced in the van was when we were in Baja, and I was like violently sick. Like I threw up a lot. Like I just like was so unwell, and I was literally just like curled up in a ball for like the whole day. It was also really hot. Like I think it was like plus 25 degrees, like just really hot. Like I was throwing up. I felt nauseous. I was sick. Just again, like not having that comfort of just like being in an air-conditioned home. Just like the heat made it way worse too. So, and then on top of that, like it was like, I don't know if there was like a party going on the beach, but it was also like just super loud that day too. So it's just like there was no like peace and quiet of just like being in your home, like being able to be comfortable and like to actually rest. So personally for me, that was probably like my worst moment in the van. And again, like that's why we say like you kind of have to be prepared for those moments where like, unless you're like renting a hotel for the night, like you gotta be okay with being sick in the van at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think my worst moment in the van was when one of the times when Yaz had to fly back and I was coming back to Canada, and right when I came through the US, I was like, oh, I gotta go, you know, I gotta get this part fixed for the van. I had it all set up like a week before, because I know how hard parts can get for this van because it's an older model van. So I get there, starts fixing it, tells me, oh yeah, there's this other piece that kind of that piece goes on top of it, needs to be replaced, and it's gonna take 2 weeks for this thing to come in, and I have nowhere else to go. Like the van, like the front tire is completely disassembled. It's like up on on a jack stand, and the mechanic guy is like, yeah, you can just stay in your van for the 2 weeks if you want. So I was like, yeah, well, I got nowhere else to go, so I had to like stealth camp in this like mechanic's parking lot in this town, Yuma, Arizona, which is, if you don't know, is a complete desert. Like it was only like the beginning of May, and the days were at minimum 35 degrees Celsius, sunny, no clouds. Overnight was over 25, and I couldn't even have the doors open because, you know, I'm like in this guy's like shop essentially, and I'm just like dying of heat. And that was like 2 weeks of that, and it's like I couldn't even really go shower at all either. I had to wait till after all that. After 2 weeks I finally could go shower. It was a rough 2 weeks, but you know, you get through it, and then that's why the highs for us outweigh the lows. But if that sounds terrible, like you wouldn't be able to bear it, like that's another, you know, maybe a reason to not necessarily live full time out of this van. Any other moments before we talk about some advice, or no?
I'd say kind of on the opposite spectrum of the heat. I'd say like this happened like 2 weeks ago. I want to say it was pretty recent.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
But like in Alberta, the winters are pretty brutal sometimes, so it's like a very dry, like harsh cold in some moments. So it was probably one of the colder days too, just our luck that we had like experienced. Every other day had been like pretty mild, but the one day that our heater like broke down, it was like minus 18 outside, so it was like super cold. We were literally like wearing our jackets inside, like pretty unbearable. We ended up getting our heater fixed, like thankfully, but that was probably like one of the worst moments, just because like you could literally see the breath, like see your breath inside the van. And with that being said, even like our drive down to Mexico too, because at that point we did not have our heater set up at that moment, so we did have some pretty cold nights and cold mornings driving through some parts of the States too. Yeah,
definitely. And that's just another thing, is that with the heater, is that since like I had to be like, I was the one who fixed it, that's another thing, is that if you're gonna be living at this thing full time, is that to be kind of handy and knowing how to fix sort of things yourself is just like it's definitely a huge plus that you would definitely want to like kind of make sure that you have some abilities to do that. Otherwise, you'll be stuck freezing minus 18 degrees weather.
Back to me holding the GoPro. So I guess the last thing kind of that we want to touch on is like things that we're most excited for in the new year, so in 2025. I'd say for me, like a big one, and for you too actually, just like it's also for you, but I feel like a big one for us is the fact that we're having our wedding in February. So we're actually flying back to Cabo San Lucas. We have about like 40 of our closest friends and family coming down in February, and we're gonna have our ceremony at this like really, really nice and big villa that we have rented for like a few days and a few nights. So that's gonna be a huge highlight. We are already legally married, so we did do our ceremony in October, just so that it wasn't complicated signing our papers like overseas. We don't really know what that process is, so we do already have the legal part done, but it'll be fun to basically just have like a huge party and celebration with our close friends and family.
Yeah, and another thing I'm looking forward to in 2025 is getting to experience a little bit more of the Rockies, because we're going to be probably for half of this year be in the Rockies while I'm working up in Banff, and then after that I think our plan will be to go to Vancouver Island and get to experience a lot of stuff on that. So that's another thing we're looking forward to in 2025.
Yeah, I'd say another thing I'm looking forward to in 2025 is running my marathon. So I did sign up for the Calgary Marathon in May, which I am excited. That's another thing too, like if you're a runner or you want to train for something like a marathon, for example, you can do it on the road. I would recommend obviously like having access to a gym. That's made it much easier for me personally to train for that. You can do it outside too. I mean, like in Canmore right now, I see a lot of runners who still run outside nowadays. You just kind of need the gear to do that. But I would say like if you're a runner or you like the gym, just make sure you have, again, like access to a gym near you.
Yeah, and I think that's about everything. So hope you guys are having a good 2025 so far, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
See you guys later.